Going to move on to my first pick. Not first overall. This is just my first guy I'm highlighting. Let's make that serious. So we've kind of mentioned I mentioned this guy a couple times over the last couple because we've been talking about. I think I've had an offensive line prospect every podcast so far.
Every other one?
No, I think it's everyone. So I kind of picked the last big one, which is Mekhi Becton, the offensive tackle out of Louisville. So this guy, he was, ranked as a decent, offensive line prospect coming in, and then he tested. So the guy's 6'7", 365 pounds. He ran the 40 in 5.1 seconds. His bench press wasn't as good as a lot of people were hoping. I think I was listening to something earlier. He was hoping that he was going to be over 30 because he was hoping to be like a freak at every part of the combine, and he only put up 23. So in comparison, a couple of guys, Andrew Thomas, who is my favorite offensive tackle in the draft, he ran in 5'2", so he's 50 pounds lighter than Becton, and ran zero point 0.1 slower. He put up 21 bench presses, and then Wirfs, who's the guy I highlighted last week, he ran it actually in 4.85. He put up 24 bench presses, so one more than he did, and he's 6'5" and 320. So he's right there, but like for the extra weight he carries, like to run that fast was impressive. And he's probably
shows how much of an athlete he is.
and he's probably the leanest.
Crazy.
He's probably the leanest 365 I've ever seen. Like he doesn't look like your tip. He doesn't look like that old style offensive lineman. This guy is a big boy, and he knows how to move. So he is a project, though. So that's one of the things that I think a lot of teams, when they're looking at drafting this guy, they really have to look back at themselves and say, look, this guy isn't a guy that's going to step in right day one and be an amazing.
I think he can play day one, but I think he's just raw.
I think he is too. He's just
he doesn't
super
get the
raw.
shine, right? He doesn't get the shine.
They have to decide.
He's really good.
They have to decide if they believe internally, and that's what a lot of these teams have to do. They have to look back in themselves. Do we have the offensive line coach that can develop this guy? If I don't think so, if we think that our guy is good, but look at the track record, maybe we haven't developed the guy is so great,
crazy talent.
but he has a lot of things going for him.
I watched highlights, man. He literally took this Clemson linebacker and threw him 5 yards down the field on this run play.
So
it was mind-boggling.
He reminds you of that kid in high school or even before high school playing football. That is just the bigger, more dominant kid. You can tell, right? He hit his growth spurt early. He's already 6'2". He's already up to 220 pounds or something, right? Like he's already a bigger kid in high school, and he's just out there mauling guys because he can. And that's what this guy does. So he's got so much power that he can do stuff like that. But he doesn't have a whole lot of technique. So a lot of it's just he relies.
He improves on that technique a little bit, man, and they coach him up a little bit.
And that's where he's at the upside, right?
He's a mauler in the run game.
When you look at it,
he's not that bad in the pass game. Just
no,
like you said, it's all about technique.
Yeah, and a lot of it, he's just going to get to that next level. And like I said, that's why you really have to look back at yourself. Like he has the most upside. Like he could be better than Andrew Thomas.
He could be the best out of this.
He could be best out of all of them. Or he could be, one of the comparables I brought up was, another freak offensive lineman that came out and was drafted high was Greg Robinson. Came out of Auburn. The guy was the same thing. He was 6'5", 332. The guy ran 4.92 in the 40, put up 32 reps on the bench press. He was an absolute freak, and he was a mauler, and he looked the exact same as Becton did. He just would grab guys, and he was just so much more physically empowering over these guys. He was just throwing them in college. And like I said, obviously Greg Robinson never turned out to be what, the Rams hoped he'd be. They took him second overall. But it's just, you hope that he's not that. You hope he's more Orlando Pace or some of those other guys that have been these big freak athletes, that were way bigger. Orlando Pace is obviously the Hall of Famer, right? Like that's
he played at a high level his whole career.
And that's the thing, right? So, but he had the option. So watching Becton on a couple other different things too. So he, in Louisville, they didn't have your typical offense. So they didn't have your typical,
God, no. They
blocking,
run a lot.
pass sets and stuff. They've ran a lot. They did a lot of action stuff. They did a lot of rollout, like moving pass sets. So you didn't really get to see him kind of drop back, take that 2 or 3 steps
Pass
to his
block,
left,
right?
pass block in the proper way. You did get to see him kind of move laterally, side to side, which was nice to see because he actually could do that.
He makes it look easy for 300. What'd you say? 360
365 pounds. Like the guy's a monster.
And when he moves his feet and they're actually in pass, like in shotgun, man. Like you said, man, he is graceful. He doesn't look out of place. Like it's crazy to think a guy who's that size and that tall can move.
He's just got to get some other things together, right? Like, the guys I find sometimes when the guys are kind of rushing at him.
He doesn't use his arms, right? Would you agree with that?
No, and that's the thing, right? He's got to get
use his arms.
He's got to get that first punch.
It.
Yeah, he's got to get that punch out. He's got to
extend his arms, right? He's always got them bent.
So it's one of those things.
Man, obviously, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm glad we agree on some things here.
We're doing pretty good this episode so far.
It's nice to agree.
Once in a while. So he's just like I said, like when you see him against a smaller guy, right? Not that they're small, but like a 250-pound linebacker or 240-pound linebacker that you'd see in college, like, or a corner. Like there was a corner, I can't remember who it was against. Maybe it was Notre Dame or someone else. But anyways, he just buried this guy, like grabbed him, threw him like 5 yards, and then like gave him another shot at it as he was down, just to be like, don't ever try to like get by me again. That's probably not your best idea. But he did. The only thing I find he even like another good thing about him, and like I'll get to what I kind of didn't think that I liked about him so much, but he will get to the second level. So he'll give the first shot and then he'd move up and grab the linebacker, or he'd move up and grab somebody else. Like that was one of the things I didn't like about one of the other guys. I can't remember now.
Wasn't it last week? It was last
week.
It
wasn't Worth. It was it was Tristan Wirth. That was my thing with Tristan Wirth.
Exactly. I'm gonna go out and say he plays whistle to whistle where Wirth you figured did not.
No, and that was my one issue with Tristan Wirth at Iowa, was that I found sometimes he didn't quite pick up the guy next the next level where the other guys did. This guy, he would move on to them.
Kind of blocked one guy and this kind of.
And sometimes they just the pass rush doesn't come to your side, and you stand there and you're looking like a retard because you're out there by yourself. So it's it is what it is. But
I don't know about you, but when I play football, man, I love to hit guys. I just love to kick off a guy go to block me, and I'd kill him anyways just because I could. Just teaching him a lesson. He'd be better the next year for it. That's the way I look at it.
That's the way they're gonna learn, right? So
exactly.
So one I found that.
How bad do you want it?
Yeah, so like I said, a lot of the pass sets and stuff, they are just these rolling pass sets, right? So they're almost the entire offensive line's moving over 4 or 5 yards to the left or the right to kind of set it up, and then they have a tight end and a back blocking the defensive end on that side. So it's a lot of double teams, it's a lot of movement and stuff. And Louisville didn't have the greatest offense, so it was harder to kind of evaluate him. But like I said,
they lost Lamar, right? So that young fellow that took over for him.
Yeah, and they actually ran like 2 quarterbacks for parts of last year too. So I found once in a while when you did see him in the actual like pass sets, because I think it was against Notre Dame, they actually had some like straight drop back, block your guy straight up type of thing. It was later on. It was later on in the game in the fourth quarter, but he did get. I was surprised that he didn't handle the rush at him as good, which you see sometimes in these big guys. He almost seemed to be caught off guard, some inside moves, and maybe he was just tired. Right? Maybe it's it's a fourth quarter. It's a long game. Maybe he was getting winded. It's hard to say, but it was kind of stood out to me that I finally actually was starting to see like some actual pass block sets. And he was looking a little worse for wear.
So that's one of the negatives you're talking about?
Yeah, like I said, like if you're gonna coach him up, and you can, don't get me wrong, like I said.
Because I noticed when he was in action, like exactly what you just said. I'm just gonna add to it. So like you said, like he is actual passing down, and they're actually passing, so it's traditional. and he's got good feet. But like his arms are bent
T-Rex
a lot.
arms, right?
Yeah, T-Rex arms.
He lets the guy get into him. No,
because he's got long arms, but it doesn't look bad. But it's just like, why give the guy the opportunity or the sniff?
That guy should never.
The difference between somebody beating you and not.
Well, that's the thing, right? You get, and I was
use your length to your advantage, right?
I was listening to an interview earlier, and they were talking to him about, who's he excited to see, and what one player, coming out against him, in the pros is going to be like kind of almost starstruck to see. And he's like, if Aaron Donald ever lines up against me, he goes, obviously he's not, typically lining out on the left end, but if he ever does line up against me, like that might be a thing where I'm like, wow, like that's Aaron Donald. And Aaron Donald would eat him alive right now. And Aaron Donald eats everybody alive, right? Like that's part of Aaron Donald.
Well, he eats Pro Bowlers alive.
Yeah, so because he's just so good technically.
Enough said.
But there's going to be a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of good, guys out there. You're going against the San Francisco 49ers defensive line. You get all these, crazy guys over there, Nick Bosa, all these other guys that are
first-round talents. All first rounds, really. Except the one they just traded.
They traded Buckner. DeForest
Buckner?
I think it was Buckner.
Yeah, because they signed Armstead or whatever.
Yeah, they signed Eric Armstead, and they still got Solomon Thomas, who they got.
And I wouldn't be surprised. Well, I don't think they will. I think they're going to take a receiver there at 13, but who knows?
Yeah. So, like I said, guy's got all the talent in the world, and if he can put it together, it's going to be impressive because he's just.
Can we both agree though, like more to like than dislike?
Oh, 100%. Like I said, he's got all kinds of upside. All kinds.
Personally, I think he could easily, with the right system, like the right coaches get their hands on him, he could easily be best tackle, and he can be dominant in the league for years, for a decade, for sure.
And maybe that's, like I said, I haven't been the biggest. I haven't been. Like, to me, he's probably the fourth. My fourth offensive tackle on my board.
But like, man, he's got crazy talent. Like he throws grown men.
Oh, he does.
Out of the way, like now.
That's it. Like you almost think you're watching like a high school tape, right? Of some of these guys.
Yeah, exactly. That is a good way to put it, right there. Exactly.
But he, like I said, you get him in the right spot. I don't know. Like I said, somewhere's like a Jacksonville.
I hate to say it. I know me and you like kind of stressing the lineman, but he is kind of it's kind of fun to watch his tape. Like to see him move a guy.
It's one of those things. If you just took the top 10, and then I say this all the time, but if you just take the top 10 highlights of him, he would be your number one overall for the offensive lineman.
It's hilarious.
It wouldn't because you're just seeing him bury guys. Like it's just
he laid on one guy, man. He just patty caked him and laid on him, and I was like, oh man, that's not a good feeling there.
Not a good feeling at all.
When you get to the tape room on Monday.
Well, that's it, right? Like all the coaches are definitely giving you the hey, how do you do?